The first thing I'd like you to consider is to think without your personality, to think, get your personality, your self-interests, your psychopathologies out of the calculation. The only way to do risk analysis, short-term or long-term, as they do in the government, is to try to get your personal issues out of the calculation. Whether you like the Turks or the Hrairias or other Armenian parties, political parties, and so on and so forth, or women or men, you take that out of the calculation. It's irrelevant. Get yourself out. Forget it. Try to do it. It's very difficult to do. Okay. Now, how do we go about it? Well, we have all kinds of problems. But one essential issue you consider when you look at foreign countries and your own country is stability or instability. Because stability and instability, the political kind, is a powerful determinant of foreign policy and mistakes that people do so frequently on foreign policy. Almost every day, several times often. And that happens around the whole world. So also try to forget what is right and what's wrong. As Armenians, you may want to consider the issue of the Armenian self-interest, and as Americans, consider the issue of the American self-interest. Now, so we had a lot of definitions and techniques and so on. I won't bother you with those, but we basically are trying to look into the future. We're trying to do trend analysis. And as soon as you begin to do it, you have to be multidisciplinary. Just because you have a PhD in political science ain't going to help you. You have to be multidisciplinary. You need to know a lot of cultural studies, multiculturalism. You have to know a lot about human pathologies, collective and individual. You know, you have to watch leaders. You can't trust leaders. Leaders are dangerous. Unless they're blessed, they're exceptions. And when the exceptions come along, we pray for them. And beyond that, you have to look at other disciplines, as I said. For example, demographics. The rate or decrease of, birth rates. Geopolitics, the location of a country. So, geostrategics. You certainly need geoeconomics, not only the internal developments of a particular economy, but how the rest of the world impacts on it. And then, definitely, as I said, leaders. Not only single leaders, but collectivities. You have to profile the whole top leadership and not one leader. Not simply Hitler, but the whole leadership of at least 100 top Nazis or Ittihadists, as we discussed last year here in this context, right? We talked about the Young Turks, and we did a social background analysis of them. Those are the things, it's called profiling. And intelligence agencies do that constantly. Constantly. So, psychopolitics is a very important dimension, but not only about the top leader, and not only about the person, the top leadership as a group, but also the masses, the psychopathologies of the masses in a particular society. Okay? And how that psychopathology may impact the leadership's decision in foreign policy and domestic politics. So, last but not least, we need a trans-global communication media. Whenever I see my neighbor, Harut, you know what he's doing? He's reading. And he's checking messages on his telephone because he's a media guy. And he knows that things change by the minute. And he wants to be, up to date. Don't forget two other factors. Religious studies. Religion is probably the most powerful force on this globe. And it's scary very often. Okay? And I'll explain that to you. And last but not least, oil energy. Oil is a curse of humanity. So the energy factor, generally, and oil is a very important determinant of, in terms of doing risk analysis. Well, let's start with the Middle East. The Middle East, and I've got some of these things lined up here. The Middle East, is very unstable. The factors of instability are the following. Number one, poverty. I know that some people in the United States don't like to talk about poverty. The Armenian church does, it should more. Okay? We don't like the poor people, do we? Sure. So, poverty. Poverty brings trouble. Poverty brings killings. Distribution of income. We don't like to talk about that in this country, right? Yeah, poverty is very important. If you want to understand the Middle East today, you have to look at poverty. Population explosion. When you have population explosion, where people sometimes, have several wives. So they have many children, right? And even beyond that, I know that, many Arab and Islamic societies have a lot of children. But when that happens, you got to feed them. When the rich get richer and the poor get poorer and fewer, when the rich get richer and fewer and the poor get poorer and many more, we have what we call relative deprivation. And that is trouble. That is revolution. That's what's been happening throughout the world, but especially in the Middle East. The Assad government not only was challenged because they're, what do you call them, Alawis and so on and so forth, and they've been brutal rulers, but because they've now distributed Syrian income dramatically. When we left Syria, Sabians, so many people I know, Syria had 3.5 million people, and now, God knows, they stopped counting, 25 plus. So therefore, in this period, the rich have got rich dramatically, and the poor have gotten poorer. And there's a price to be paid. Now, it so happened that the Sunni dimension, the Sunni category, which is the most numerous category, had the greater poor among them. Okay? When therefore, Alevi versus Sunni, okay, is reinforced not only by the possession of power by one, the Alevis, but also the maldistribution of wealth, where the Sunnis have become poorer and poorer. There's going to be trouble there. And there was. Underemployment, and this is general about the Middle East, by the way. Female underemployment and oppression. Middle Eastern women are furious. Muslim women are furious precisely because they've been oppressed since the beginning of time. The rentier patrimonial capitalism and nepotism that we have in so many of these countries. The shuyukh in Sheikh Shuyukh, the kings and the emirs of the Gulf, as well as the rest of the Arab population. And generally, this is true about much of the Islamic world. The oil curse, we talked about briefly, and that leads very often to corrupt and incompetent leadership. The oil curse. Social media and new communications technologies. And here, the interesting institution is the Al Jazeera, they came last year into the United States, and we'll see what they do. The Jazeera is a fascinating story. The the Qataris felt many years ago, I went to Qatar. It was a long time ago. You know, they were very, very relatively poor at that time. Money was just coming in, and they thought that nobody paid any attention to them, and nobody did. Well, they want attention. And since they have only 250,000 original Qataris, and overwhelmed, maybe 10% of the population of the country, they're insecure. They want power. They want attention. They have an inferiority complex. Now, I don't want you to put this term right into the American or any newspapers, because I can't go to Qatar again in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, okay? And that applies to the Saudis, the Bahrainis, and so on and so forth. So I'm asking you, not to do that. All right? I mean, I've lost enough money as director of the Institute of Armenian Studies, not doing my consultancy. So, now that I'm retired from that position, I plan to go back to my old work. So help me on this. Social media and communications, very powerful instrument. That was one of the factors that made the Egyptian revolution over 3 years ago, successful. And leaders don't like that, because they see that as a threat, whether it's a Putin or whether it's a, Hafez al-Assad or an Erdogan, one of my favorite people. One of the things that is very important in risk analysis is as I said, the leader and how you profile that leader. If we have time a little later on, I may be able to talk about that. But to do profiling, leader profiling, you have to have quite a bit of information about them, about their private lives. But also you need to apply some very powerful psychosociological theories. And you have to observe their behavior over time if you want to predict their behavior in domestic or foreign policy. Now, so let me go to the next page. This is not a very clear picture, but this picture is very important in terms of describing the Middle East as the Sunni versus the Shia. Remember that the Sunni are the overwhelming majority of the Muslims, and most of you know that. But the Shia are a minority, but a very important minority. The reason they're very important is because they are, I don't want to use the term, because my senior colleagues are here and we are in the church. They are furious. I want to use the keyword. They're very furious because since almost the beginning of time, since the fourth caliph, Ali, was assassinated, and then his grandchildren, Hassan and Hussein especially, were killed, Hussein and Karbala in Iraq. They've been furious because they've been constantly overwhelmed, massacred, and subjected to asfaltun. So, here are Iran, of course, overwhelming majority. There are exceptions, but overwhelming majority is Shia, and there's 12 Shiites, not 7ers. There are all kinds of other types of Shiites, which I won't go into. Their extension is southern Iraq, 65% of the population, approximately, we think. Some Shia right there in the heart of Afghanistan, very important Shia group that are constantly brutalized. Shia in India, Shia in Pakistan, who are regularly massacred in Pakistan. Okay? And then Shia are adversaries, the Azeris. Right? Azerbaijan is overwhelmingly Shia. Although they are Soviet-type Shia, and the present government doesn't encourage Shiaism because they know that their enemy here, Iran, will use Shiaism against them, against the rulership. So then there are some Shia in some important places, in Yemen, for example. They're Shia, they're called Houthi. They're a special sect. The Alawi. The Alawi, there's a serious doubt that Alawis are really Muslim. In fact, the real Muslims, especially right-wing Muslims, they don't recognize their Islamism. They call them with negative names, very bad names, because they don't, their religion is a hodgepodge of all kinds of other religions, including Christianity, Mazdaism, and so on and so forth. But before I go into without going into that, let me point out that they were legitimized when Ayatollah Khomeini took over in 1979 after the Iranian Revolution. Okay, he wanted to project power out of Iran, and he sent a very important fatwa to the Alawis, declaring them a part of Shiaism. Okay, and that drove the Muslim Brotherhood, especially of Syria, furious. You may remember, and I was there one night. I'd gone to Syria to speak, but I had a diplomatic passport, so I didn't have to worry about my health, and they took care of me. But I gotta tell you, at night in Aleppo they were shooting, and soon afterwards the revolution began that Hafez al-Assad suppressed with genocidal means, back in 1982. Hama, you may remember. Okay. So, the major players in the Middle East are the Sunni countries versus the Shia, the Sunni led by the Saudis, the Shia led by Iran. Now, one of the first things you learn when you read and you study Middle East history is that there are three main elements in the Middle East. The fourth was added with the establishment of the Israeli state. The three original elements hate each other. And that's basic in foreign policy analysis. The Turks, the Persians, and the Arabs, they've been fighting since the beginning of time. As I said, the Israelis have been added more recently as an important factor. So the Sunni bloc includes Turkey, and one after the other, I will simply go like this. Not too important. No? Yeah, this, I want to show you the complete idiot's chart to understand the Middle East. A colleague did this, and I'm showing it to you. The reason for that is because you see under these colorful lights, right, lines, all kinds of strange things, where you say, well, if a country like Saudi Arabia is aiding Egypt, why is it opposed to the Muslim Brotherhood and supports the Egyptian military? The Saudis saw the Egyptian military as their ultimate enemy. Some of you may remember the charismatic, secular Egyptian leader, Gamal Abdel Nasser. We did our best to get rid of that, and we could talk about that at length. The point I'm trying to make is that the Saudis now support the Egyptian military and not the Muslim Brotherhood. There are all kinds of things that are very difficult to explain. And sometimes foreign policymakers, in terms of doing immediate responses to an enemy, they take immediate decisions without calculating their long-term problems or the blowbacks. the blowback is a very important factor. One of the worst blowbacks in American foreign policy is what? Afghanistan. You know, a bunch of socialists from Afghanistan, Afghan socialists, took power. 1978, 79, and then, by God, you know, the tribes started attacking them, so they went to the Soviet Union, asked Soviet help. And the Soviets, Brezhnev, in a stupid manner, sent the whole army. Okay? And so what? How do we respond? How do we respond to this? Well, we couldn't do it because we had just gotten out of Vietnam, 58,000 Americans killed. Okay, so what do? We get other people to do our fighting. We spent $5 billion. We built the so-called Mujahideen. Jihad? Mujahid is the jihadist fighter. The Mujahideen, we put together Afghan tribes, gave them money to Pakistan, where there was a very corrupt ruler, Zia Haq, a general of course, and therefore we built the Mujahideen. Bin Laden went there. The Saudis, the Egyptians, everybody sent their extreme jihadists over there. They were hoping they'd go and not come back. They came back later. That's where Bin Laden was. That's where the movement began. He was sent, and he became a very important key operator, supporting the Mujahideen with money, training, and so on. As soon as the Soviets left, eventually the Afghan government fell. Then Mujahideen declared victory against communism and turned back at the West, led by the United States. The point here is that, you know, the blowback factor, you don't do things that are going to blow back. Now, at that time, we knew very well. In fact, well, I don't want to talk about my writings. We know very well that we had a movement in Islam, in Islamic countries, that was beginning to develop, and that was the move to the right, to extremism, to jihadism. It started way back in the Ottoman Empire, during the Ottoman Empire. It became stronger when the Ottoman Empire as a caliphate collapsed, and Hassan al-Banna in 1928 established the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Okay, and from the Muslim Brotherhood came out all kinds of, even many more extreme and still developing extremist organizations. At this point, okay, we sat with the president, not that he talked to me on Wednesday night. We had a very, very important get-together at the Shoah Foundation. And the Institute of Armenian Studies is closely associated with the Shoah Foundation. And I was looking the way he was speaking. Okay? And I was saying as a political scientist, what's he speaking about? He was talking about killings, peace, and so on, in a very, very moving manner. But there's one thing that keeps him awake. Well, there's several things. Number one is the geometrical increase of Islamic jihadism throughout the world right this second. It's not simply in Syria. We've got calculations from all over the world. If you are an American president and have experienced 9/11, that's what you worry about. You don't worry about Benghazi that Republicans want to discuss again. I was in Benghazi too once. Met Gaddafi there, another weird guy. May Allah bless his soul. So therefore, we look at the analysis, we see some numbers. You see, Turkey was 35. Well, that's just a percentage. It's not reliable, but there's a 35% that Turkey can be unstable during the next 5, 6 years, perhaps 7 years. Saudi Arabia, 40%. Here I have Shia, precisely because I forgot to tell you in my analysis before, there are 2.5 million Shia in Saudi Arabia, which are looked upon, you know, as pro-Iranian, you know, many of them pro-Iranian agents and so on, and they're suppressed and they're very poor. That's one of the reasons why they don't like the Saudi leadership. Maldistribution of income is a very important factor there. Kuwait, they're Shia. Kuwaiti Shias are quite peaceful. You know, well, because they're among the rich. The Kuwaiti government is smart. I had a number of Shia students, Kuwaiti students. They could have bought me and my house and so on. Qatar, very few Shiites, but Qatar has got an identity crisis. And I talked about that a little while ago. Qatar can be quite unstable if they don't watch out, because of a variety of factors having to do with such huge wealth and such incredible poverty among the people who work there. That's why the United Nations is beginning to accuse them for serious problems of you know, human rights. Then Bahrain. Now Bahrain, these are my friends, you know. I know His Majesty, the King, and so on and so forth. They're very friendly people, except that the King has an uncle who's been Prime Minister for the last 27, 28 years. And he does most of the ruling, and Bahrain is at least 60% Shia. And there was substantial democratization until about 2.5 years ago, when the thing broke down, and since that time there have been demonstrations, and you know, the Saudis came in with the UAE with their you know, police forces, and some of these people have been suffering the Shia, although it's not as brutal as many other places. Then we have here, let's see if I can get this back to my, yeah. Here we have Yemen, the Houthis. We talked about the Shia there. Jordan, over 60% Palestinian. The rest are local tribes of the north and the south, and the king is from them, and that calls for instability, much more stable than other parts. But then 250,000 or more or less Syrians living there make it very, very unstable. So United Arab Emirates, similar problems, despite the richest there. Although there are some changes that may, they're sort of wising up. Oman. Oman is Abadi. And Abadi, I don't have time to explain, is not a Shia, because it's a pre-Shia group that went against Ali and others. So they're Abadis, but they have Sunni minorities. And the Imam, or the Sultan, as he calls himself, has been there since the very beginning of time. He doesn't have children. He can't get married. I mean, he's not married. So therefore, if anything happens to him, there's going to be a family feud. Oh, Jordan here, okay, they're repeated. Okay, Israel versus Palestine. And this is one of the Middle East's most destabilizing issues. This is one of the reasons, not only reason, one of the reasons that triggered the rise of Islamism. Okay? And certainly contributed to it. If that thing had been settled some time ago, you would have seen Hamas Hamas. Hamas is the extension, a jihadist extension of the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay? Why did the Palestinian movement, which was an Arab nationalist movement, PLO, and all of the organizations within it, they radicalized as the time went on because there was no solution to the Palestinian cause. When there's no solution, people are desperate, the people are poor, the people are wrong, they go for the rightest solution. And they become jihadists. And that's what's happening. Now, Egypt, don't let me get started on Egypt. But, you know, that's my first book was on Egypt, and I still admire Nasser. Now, they're beginning to realize Nasser's value throughout the whole place. So, don't be surprised if in some places, and there's the beginnings of an anti-Islamist, anti-jihadist movement, where Islam is going back to the concept of nationalism. And that was Nasser, Pan-Arabism. Pakistan versus Afghanistan, and here is the two other things that an American president will not sleep on. And that is, of course, especially Pakistan. You know, I always tell my Israeli friends that they should not, in an immediate sense, lose faith or lose sleep about the Iranian bomb. The Iranian bomb is not there. It could be. Here we have over 250, 300 atomic bombs. They've been sitting there for a long time. Pakistan is one of the most unstable countries in the whole Islamic world. Pakistan's military intelligence service consists of quite a few Islamists who are connected to the Taliban. They were the ones who knew where bin Laden was in Abbottabad, right? And they didn't tell us. We had to discover ourselves to go get the man. And therefore, think. And if you know Pakistani history, you see how many changes of governments they've had since the beginning of time, which was, you know, their separation from India, 1947. So Pakistan is a very unstable country, and if there's a collapse, there's a very high probability that atomic weapons for the first time in history will get into the hands of jihadists, including Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. This is what you have to worry about, people. Afghanistan, Alexander the Great, he was a great man. He went there, he turned around, he went back to Iran, Persia. He knew that he was in the wrong place. In judgment, I respect. I'm talking about Alexander the Great of Macedon. So I won't talk much about Afghanistan, but that's quite to be, you know, there could be miracles. I believe in miracles. We're in a miracle day. And here. Now, on this side we have Iran, about 40% instability, especially if my colleague is here, just got her PhD. Where are you? Lady. Yes. She just finished a dissertation at UCLA, and I was on the committee. They brought me from USC because, you know, they want somebody to check on what they're doing. So she wrote a dissertation on Khamenei. Khamenei is a serious problem in Iran precisely because he's afraid to liberalize. If he liberalizes, he's afraid that he'll lose power. It's a very complex situation. I wish I could go in there, but if Rouhani wins in his liberalization, if he gets enough support from the West, okay, especially from the United States, so that Iran's economy could get better and make a deal on stopping the nuclear issue, that would solve the Israeli problem of constantly, I can understand them because they don't want to be removed from the earth, right? So after what's happened to the Jews, they're paranoid, and I can understand that paranoia. We need to be as paranoid as Armenians. So therefore, we'll see where it goes, whether the president is successful in making a deal with them, so that would substantially solve even problems like Syria and other similar problems. Because the Iranian axis, again, Khomeini created that. Khomeini all the way, Tehran all the way to Baghdad, to where? Syria, to Hezbollah in South Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen, and so on and so forth, the ones in Afghanistan, and etc. So Iraq, well, here again we have many Iraqi friends here. We need a miracle, 80%, instability, and we want in Iraq to. There was an election. Some of it looks positive, but we have to wait and see. Again, it's a huge topic. I don't want to talk about 100%, of course. Syria, where there's a war going on, and Lebanon 80%, Yemen, Houthis 80%. Okay. Now, multiple miscalculations of self-interest have created the modern Middle East by the local governments, the great powers, and the United States. Now, the Armenian interest in this whole thing, if I may have the light here, obviously, I think you'll agree with me that the Armenian interest is sustaining independent Armenia, Artsakh, and diaspora. Easy enough. So, it would be in our interest, for example, to have a U.S. settlement with Iran on the atomic issue, and Iran being a part of the, brought back into the, Society of Nations, and with better economy and so on and so forth, and the lower level of Islamic commitment. The nuclear issue is a very important issue to solve, and that will sort of satisfy the Israelis. Russia and the United States, again, a peaceful solution to their recent confrontation. It's too bad that Mr. Obama and Mr. Putin psychologically and sociologically come from different cultures and different backgrounds, and hoping that that would settle. It would be in the Armenian interest. Turkey. In Turkey, we need to continue to explore restitution policies with Mr. Erdogan. Explore if there is the opportunity in order to sustain Armenia's economy. The sustenance of the Armenian economy is extremely important, because the worst thing that's happening to Armenia, and we don't like to talk about it, is people leaving Armenia. You see? So if you can make a restitutional deal, even a small one, with the Turks to get money going to Armenia, despite its corruption, okay, it's better than nothing. To not only turn back this erosion, population emigrating, to reverse it to an immigration. Similar to Israel and Germany, where they got huge amounts of money and restitution of various forms for the Holocaust. So for the centennial that we're facing, we need to engage in a global propaganda and activism for not only Turkish recognition of the Armenian genocide, that will continue. That should continue constantly. But we need to press as a priority through legal action for Turkish restitution to Armenia, even without recognizing the genocide. Restitution to Armenia through legal means and political pressure from Turkey on Turkey is much more important than Turkey saying the G word, the genocide word. And then remember that a lot of us don't like Obama. And many of us don't like Erdogan, of course, right? He's a Turkish leader. But remember, if there's an opportunity to negotiate with Erdogan, do it. You know why? I don't know who's going to take over his place. Now he's popular. He may even become the powerful president of Turkey that he wants to be by revising the constitution. But his replacement may be much worse than him. If the Ataturkists come back to power, you know, they didn't talk to the Armenians. They're very nasty to the Armenians. This guy is less nasty. So if you can deal with him, you deal with him. Take out your own hatred and your premonitions and so on, your personal preferences out of the equation. The important thing is to save Armenia. So therefore, and then the balanced policies of Armenia and Armenians toward the Sunnis and the Shiites. We can't take sides, and because we need to secure Armenia and diasporas, Armenian diasporas in Iran, Iraq, Egypt, Lebanon, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. We have diasporas there. We have business there. We need to be very careful to balance everything, to be nice to these people, to sustain ourselves. Balanced policies towards the Arabs and the Israelis. We have interests on both sides, very important interests on both sides. So the two-state solution to the Palestinian question would be in the Armenian interest. Not only in the Armenian interest, you know, in a political sense, okay? And finally, getting the Israelis to recognize, Harut has been working with them for a long time, the Armenian genocide. We do have a majority in the Knesset, but the cabinet has to decide on it. But also for Jerusalem, you know, we have the fellow from Aleppo as being a patriarch there, right? And this patriarch is tough. So therefore, the previous patriarch is a wonderful guy, by the way. He's an Iraq seed. So. Okay, so now, last but not least, I just want to very, very fast go over this. Do I have another 5 minutes? 2 minutes? 3 minutes? Okay. So to succeed, what do? We forge a united diaspora as a global actor in preparing for the 2015 centennial. United global diaspora. Okay? Strengthen Armenia, the Armenian political economy, to be a real actor in the Middle East and in the Caucasus, so that we can press Turkey to make a deal, that is restitution, to reverse emigration from Armenia. We talked about that. Establish a new organizational framework for geostrategic Armenian unity, including the diaspora and the Armenian Republic. Think about that. We don't have such an organization. Do. We have noticed recently, I felt a Norvoki, a new spirit, during the Zadig and Zadig, and during the centennial, But we need to sustain that spirit of unity and increase our activism globally, seeking to unite the factionalized diaspora and the Armenian Republic with all of its problems, and unite them not only in politics but in religion, culture, philanthropy, the church in itself. Does diaspora have a military, economic strategy and preparedness? How many diaspora organizations have developed such a strategy in case Armenia and Artsakh are brought under attack? So get serious. Instead of making noise, instead of getting pictures taken with politicians and so on and so forth, you need to ask yourself, are you prepared to send your kids and yourself to go fight there? And do you have a plan of action for that? The hour is late. Armenians need to decide whether they are committed to sacrificing their blood, wealth, and might to remain and thrive as a nation in the world of nations. Do you want to remain a nation, or you want to go back to being a minority? Maybe we are destined to return to minority status. If so, let's not waste time and speeches and pictures and newspaper pictures and so on and so forth. If we're not serious about nationhood, we can play diaspora politics and have fun as a proclamation. American interests, defense from jihadist, suicidal Islamist nihilism, as I talked about, the nuclear threat from Pakistan, possible Iranian, Shiite, low-level threat if we can make a deal with them. Now we're talking about the United States. We need to neutralize the Islamist threat from the Middle East and beyond. We need to stabilize the Middle East, whether it's Israel versus the Palestinian or Iran versus Saudi Arabia, or what's happening in Egypt, or our confrontation with Russia to establish a strategic balance between us. We need to reduce the American military presence and straighten out our minds. In other words, we need to play hard with Middle Eastern powers who want us to defend them both externally and internally. You see? In other words, we need to not simply treat as if, we can't recognize the Armenians because the Turks are going to close the base in Incirlik. Okay? That the Turks are so important for the United States. We forget that the United States is much more important for Turkey and everybody else in the Middle East, including the Saudis. And finally, by the way, some of my friends on the Arab side, Saudis and so on, have begun to recognize that. Last year, this time, they hadn't recognized it. They were very furious at us. The United States is much more important to the Middle East, everybody in the Middle East, including those who have oil, okay, than they are to us. And that includes Turkey. So, no one else can fill the vacuum but the United States. Therefore, Turks, Saudis, Israelis, Iranians need the US more than the US needs them. Therefore, the President Obama need not fear, say, Armenian genocide recognition due to Turkish threats and so on. So, reduce our military and foreign expenditures to rebuild America at home, to reverse destabilizing forces in the United States, and that's the other thing the President is worried about. We have a very high rate of increases of rightist militias, okay, and so-called patriot movements. our intelligence services very carefully watch them. And they are extremely dangerous. That's why they watch them on a daily, hourly basis. And the reason for their existence is not only because so many Latinos and others coming to the United States, but because that segment, especially in the rural areas, in the small cities, that segment of the population has been getting poorer and poorer. Relative deprivation, the top 1% versus everybody else, and those whites are furious because they're among the very poor, sometimes just about as poor as Afro-Americans. So economic inequality, poverty, white supremacists got to be watched, as I pointed out, corruption, ineffective leadership in the United States, the educational crisis, undemocratic electoral, legal, and communication structures. Without strengthening America at home, we cannot stabilize the Middle East conflicts, and prevent genocidal situations, of which there are at least about 15 around the world waiting to happen. Thank you.